The photo shows a Sioux girl who lived on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, United States. The shot is by Jesse H. Bratley, an educator who, between 1893 and 1903, worked in schools for indigenous peoples and took the chance while he was there to capture scenes of daily life and of how these communities were being educated. The image shows Iron Hawk, an Oglala Lakota leader of the Sioux Nation, photographed in 1900 during the Greater America Exposition in Omaha, Nebraska. There he was acting as an indigenous delegate. The photo, now historic, was taken by the well-known Herman Hayne and James Matson, specialists in portraying Native chiefs. The photo shows Chief Lewison, leader of the Flathead tribe based in Montana, United States. Taken in 1908 by photographer N.A. Forsyth, who at the time worked for the company Underwood & Underwood, the image is part of a set of detailed records about indigenous peoples from that period. Before we go on, click subscribe and turn on the bell so every new episode gets to you at the right time, and nothing in this journey goes unnoticed. The historic photo shows Spotted Eagle Chief, leader of the Atazipcho Lakota, also called Sans Arc, a branch of the Sioux Nation that lived in the area of what is now the state of Montana, in the U.S. The shot was taken in 1880 by photographer L.A. Huffman, who worked for a widely circulated stereoscopic image company. The photo shows a Navajo craftswoman weaving rugs and blankets from sheep's wool in Canyon de Chelly, a national monument in Arizona. The picture is by Carl Moon, a photographer and artist who, in the early 20th century, dedicated himself to broadly documenting the life and culture of Native peoples living in the United States. The photo shows a young Ute woman, a Numic people who lived in the mountains of the western U.S. in the 19th century. Shot around 1880, she appears in a dark dress with fringe and embroidery. The image is part of a collection that aimed to document indigenous daily life and culture. These records help preserve memories from that period. The photo records the meeting of two Oglala Lakota leaders with a U.S. officer. There are American Horse, who worked as an interpreter and guide for the Army, and Red Cloud, famous for resisting the advance into the Powder River Valley. Beside them is Captain Frank North, commander of the Pawnee Scouts. The photo shows Bird Wildhog, a Cheyenne also known as hedgehog, photographed in 1890 by Christian Barthelmess at Fort Keogh in Montana. He served as a scout for the U.S. Army and was the son of an important leader of the Northern Cheyenne, who had left Indian Territory in 1879, a milestone for the group. The photo, taken in 1880 by L.A. Huffman in Montana, shows a member of the Crow people who lived on the plains and in the mountains of the North American West. He wears traditional clothes and holds a gun, a sign that he worked as a hunter able to take down big game like buffalo and elk, playing a role in the group's survival. Kes Ka-Yo of the Cree Nation and known as Bob Small lived between Canada and the U.S. He got the nickname because he wore his hair with the braid cut short, something rare among indigenous people at the time. In 1906, he traveled to Butte, Montana, where photographer F.E. Piso captured his image in a striking portrait that helped preserve his presence in history. In the image, we see a member of the Crow people taking part in a celebration at the Crow Fair. The fair, held on the banks of the Little Bighorn River near Billings, Montana, brought together every year in the early 20th century different indigenous nations of the Great Plains, reinforcing identity and cultural continuity. Kia Tadi was a young woman from the Laguna people in the southwest of the United States. She was also called Loti or Lota Atsi, names that probably came from Spanish or American settlers. She lived in the village of Laguna in New Mexico around 1904. Her life shows the contact between indigenous traditions and outside influences. Mato Witkotko, also recorded as Matuwitko, was a Yanktonai leader of the Dakota people. His name in the ancestral language means brown bear or crazy bear. In 1872, American photographer Alexander Gardner, famous for portraying the Civil War and indigenous chiefs, took the portrait that made him last in history. Before we go on, click subscribe and turn on the bell so every new episode gets to you at the right time and nothing in this journey goes unnoticed. At the turn of the 20th century in Montana, N.A. Forsyth's camera recorded the meeting of two worlds, Native Americans watching and checking out an automobile, a recent symbol of European presence. The image shows curiosity, adaptation, and the quiet impact of new technologies on their ways of life. In the photo taken by John C.H. Grable in 1891, we see a Lakota group in their everyday life on the plains. In the background, tipis rise up, cone-shaped tents made of hide or canvas over wooden frames. Light and fast to set up, they allowed the people to move according to the weather and hunting routes. Taken around 1920, the photo shows a Kiowa woman, a people of the Great Plains. She wears worked hide, a bead necklace, a decorated belt, and a headscarf. Each piece reinforces the link with Kiowa tradition and the value placed on handmade work. The whole look expresses the group's identity and memory. The image shows Sitting Bull, Lakota leader of the Hunkpapa group, remembered for leading resistance to U.S. policies against the peoples of the Great Plains and for his influence among Native people. The portrait was taken by David Francis Berry, a renowned photographer of the American West, around 1880. The image, made in the early 20th century, records daily life on the Crow Reservation in Montana. A man in traditional clothes calmly paints the leather tipi, using brushes and natural pigments. The scene was captured by Richard Throssell, a Cree descendant adopted by the Crow to preserve that moment. The image, made in 1870, shows a young Iroquois woman, a member of the Confederation of Peoples who lived in the Great Lakes region. The photo was taken by educator and writer Dr. Vandersmith, who saw photography as a way to document cultures. She wears a dark embroidered dress and a bead necklace, pieces tied to her people's tradition. Garnet, a member of the Oglala Lakota people, was photographed in 1877 by Charles Milton Bell, a Washington photographer known for portraying indigenous leaders. In the photo, he wears a feather headdress, a bead necklace, a fur coat, and a sacred pipe, clear signs of his culture, role, and prestige in the traditional community. Lu Sa Kuri Kulaha, a Pawnee man whose name means day worthy of respect, lived in the central U.S. In 1869, he was photographed by the Jackson brothers, photographers from Omaha, Nebraska, who recorded indigenous peoples and landscapes of the North American West to better show that region to the public. In 1889, a young Apache woman from the southwest U.S. was photographed by D.B. Chase, known for documenting indigenous peoples. The image came at a time of tension, when her people were resisting the advance of the U.S. government over territories they considered sacred and were defending their way of life. In 1898, at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha, the U.S. Indian Congress took place, bringing together more than 500 representatives. Among them was American Horse, a Sioux leader, photographed by Adolph F. Muir at the request of Frank A. Reinhardt. The shot aimed to document indigenous presence at that historic gathering. Among the Cheyenne, there was an elite troop called the Dog Soldiers, created to guarantee order, discipline, and to protect the people. They followed the decisions of a council of 44 chiefs renewed every 10 years. They arose after the prophet Sweet Medicine in the Black Hills received 4 sacred arrows and reorganized the nation. In 1879, German-American photographer John K. Hillers photographed 2 young Hopi girls during an expedition to the southwest U.S. promoted by the Bureau of American Ethnology. Standing in front of an adobe wall in Arizona, they wear traditional clothes and silver jewelry as a sign of their people's cultural identity. We've reached the end of our video. Subscribe to our channel and leave a comment if you liked the content. See you next time.